Hello, everyone. Welcome to International Actionists Podcast. In this episode, we will be kind of continuing the themes we were talking about in the previous one with the spread of noise, just talking about how noise is released and distributed and the different methods and mindsets there are surrounding that. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on the rise of digital releases and talk about specifically Bandcamp being a large part of the noise scene in recent years. And go into all that. So, where should we start with this?
Well, it's obviously no surprise, and everyone knows this, that digital streaming and digital distribution is the most popular form of music distribution nowadays. I mean, it has been for a while now. It's not a surprise to anyone, and that's come with like its own, ups and downs and things that people in the past couldn't have foreseen. And it's just interesting to think about it specifically in terms of noise, like, physical media becoming less popular in like the general sense. In the past you had no choice other than to buy a CD or a vinyl or whatever, but now we've got options, obviously. And we're going to talk about, like you said, we're going to talk about Bandcamp this time as well. So what do you guys think about like streaming services in regards to noise, or just do you think it has like do you think it's good for noise? Do you think it's just like a fact of life, like a evil that we have to accept? Do you think it's a good thing? Because I don't personally use streaming services. I just basically incidentally have a free Spotify account on my phone, but I've just got a bunch of files on an SD card in my phone instead.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually just purchased my own Spotify account today because I was previously just using my parents' account, and I just kind of wanted to like separate it so I have my own thing. And I felt a little bad about it because I know that Spotify doesn't know the best like practices and whatnot. And I feel kind of bad about supporting them, but at the same time, like I have all these playlists that I already made. I would like to continue to keep those and add to them, and it's just kind of like, what other option is there really for just like easy, convenient access to all this digital music? So just like whatever, I'll bite the bullet and go for it. But yeah, I think it's interesting with noise specifically related to streaming, because there certainly is noise on things like Spotify and Apple Music, whatever else. But like the vast majority of it is not. And I think that's maybe the only genre you can really say that about at this point in time. A lot of people seem to gravitate towards, Bandcamp or just physicals, and not want to have anything to do with streaming. I feel like it's mostly just like the bigger artists in the noise scene, like Merzbow or Prurient, that you actually find like a bunch of their stuff on Spotify. But even then, it's only like a fraction of their discography. So.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like you were saying, like it's just a fact of life now. Things like streaming, just for ease of access and convenience. I mean, because I guess in the grand scheme of things, like it's almost unavoidable. We as a people, our attention spans have shortened quite considerably, and using your cell phone for just about everything in your daily life is almost like it's not even like a conscious decision a lot of the time. So it's kind of nice to have the ability to seek music out and have access to it. And I think something like noise, I think that was an inevitability, just because with the internet and things like Bandcamp and whatever, giving people more access and ability to share things than ever before with the whole world. I mean, who doesn't, I have a strong feeling that a lot of times with making art, it's almost like, what's the point if you don't, get it to somebody else in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, we could talk about some of the downsides of that, because I think they play into noise just as much as they play into any other thing that people are sharing on the internet. And maybe you could talk about quantity over quality or anything that falls under those kinds of things. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, I mean, some people, especially factors like finances and accessibility. I mean, Johnny, you've talked plenty about, being in Australia and feeling kind of a limitation to access to some of these niche things like noise and stuff. Yeah. And like a lot of times, like the main way you've said you procure a lot of it is through, buying online and stuff like that. But, there's plenty of instances where like buying something physical, especially in a world like noise where things are so limited and done DIY, so the cost of shipping things and making some bigger number of things that justifies being able to ship them all over to places and take the time out to do that, it's a big thing. So sometimes your only option to even hear it is to seek it out digitally, otherwise it remains a mystery.
Yeah, like personally speaking, a lot of my teenage years, I was addicted to just downloading music and just seeking out as much music as possible. So that was like, the early to mid 2010s. So Spotify was around, but I don't think it was as ubiquitous as it is now. I spent a lot of time on like 4chan's music board, browsing the share threads where people would just post download links to stuff, and that's how I got a lot of exposure to noise and artists that I still listen to and artists that I still love, and I go to their shows and stuff like that. So obviously, like, the internet's here to stay, right? It's so interesting that I can't really comprehend a time before the internet. I'm 29, so I did experience a time before the internet was everywhere, but I wasn't old enough to like really recognize the repercussions of that. I was just like at school playing with my friends. I wasn't like downloading obscure noise tapes on my computer or anything. But like you hear, we listen to these interviews and read articles and stuff about noise in the 80s and 90s, and they're talking about like tape trading and like, I knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy. It's completely,
it's like a mythical status for that stuff now,
I can't fathom that at all.
I definitely, because I know Johnny, you and I are a little bit closer in age, so I mean, that's a thing that I talk about with people all the time, is sort of like essentially remembering the before times in some sense, but just the same as you. I mean, I'm only a couple years older, so it's like essentially the same story. But like I think there's like one thing I would think about. So there's no reason to go deeper into this so much, because it would be a pointlessly philosophical tangent that could get us totally derailed. But I consider something like the internet and the state of how it is today to essentially just be an extension of reality as we know it. You know what I mean? That is very much just as real now as, your fucking hand in front of you. Like, obviously it's a virtual representation, blah, 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 but that's just as much a part of, how we perceive the world, in my opinion, is social media, the internet. That's very much where we live a lot of our lives now. And I think that you could make an argument for something like treated, in the real reality as like the underground. So like, tape trading and noise and subcultures like this, it only makes sense that at some point it would, move over into the virtual and maybe not mirror it, because I think that's impossible. It's a different landscape, but it has to exist somehow, because it is, like I said, it's just as much a part of our real life as anything. So
Yeah, and
I
I
don't
think an important thing to point out too is that, we have all, being relatively young, like, we discovered noise through the internet, right? Like we wouldn't have even discovered that if not. And yeah, so it's like kind of hard for us to comprehend, like, how did people even find out about this stuff before that? But yeah, so it's like, I don't know. I think having the mindset of like, oh, the internet ruined noise, and like it was better when it was just tape trading. Like I do understand that, because maybe there was more of a pure kind of organic connection between just like individual people, and that kind of sense of like collaboration and just sort of like a close knit circle or whatever. But I think it's just as cool, if not even better, to be able to just find people all across the world who are into this stuff. I mean, obviously, like Johnny, like we wouldn't have met if it wasn't for the internet, and we wouldn't be able to connect
honestly
and do all this. So.
You and me either, and definitely, obviously, myself and Johnny because of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this is so it's a very important thing. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think a lot of people like to, for just reasons, villainize the state of the internet now and how it kind of runs our fucking lives. But again, in my opinion, it's very much a part of our real experience and the landscape within that. And, it gives the potential for more eyes and ears to go on it, but that's honestly, is that a bad thing? You know what I mean? Like, I always say, and I might have even said this in a previous talk, just talking about my old job, but I had that realization, and going back into what you just even mentioned, Johnny, with like 4chan's music board, where it was like, that was my introduction to the entire world of music that I give a shit about now, noise included. And, clearly now a lot of these things get shared because of the, for lack of a better word, shareability of these things online. And they move around in a way that you could definitely relate to what maybe you'd term like trends and this and that, things go in and out on like almost like a meme scale. But I always try to remember, in my opinion, too, that I feel like, myself included, like when you find something new through these means, that was just kind of your gateway into it, and the real ones are going to stick around, and then the other people that actually don't care, they're going to move on to the next thing. And yeah, you know what I mean? So
yeah, for like if you compare the amount of people who know about noise and know what noise is versus the amount of people who are actually like really into it and really dedicated to it, I mean, it's such a small subset of that. There are videos that go somewhat viral, I've seen, like on Instagram or whatever, of like noise bands doing stuff, and mostly the comments are either like hating on it or just like memeing on it, whatever. And like you can tell like most of those people watching it like have no idea what's going on and don't actually like it per se. Maybe they're just intrigued. But I also wanted to point out, to kind of maybe start to transition into the whole Bandcamp discussion, like another really positive thing of the internet, of Bandcamp, I think, is like, again, like that idea of being able to discover other people. And like something I did a while back was I just searched like noise and a certain other keywords similar to that into Bandcamp, and then put the location to be like right around me. And that's how I met Kyler Dewitched, the other member of Despatialized with me and Slater, and as well as like Andrew FX and some other people who like came to the noise picnic that I did last year. So it's like, that was like an amazing thing. Like now we're like really close friends, and that was just born out of me having the idea to search in Bandcamp this way, and that created this like really genuine connection.
Yeah, I've done that too. I've searched noise and then Melbourne, and then I've found a few labels and artists and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, like, obviously the internet it has amazing properties. It has amazing potential for
and
stuff
it's
like
here
this.
to stay.
And it's here to stay. I guess where I take issue with it is I really value the Web 1.0 style of internet, where it was like individual people doing individual things and connecting with others like on a personal level, rather than like anonymous corporations and like content algorithms and stuff. Personally speaking, I have like quite like my opinion on social media and stuff has really gone down over the past 5 or 6 years or something. Like realizing my internet addiction and things like that. I'm addicted to YouTube, man. I thought like I was better than it, but I'm addicted to YouTube. I'm just scrolling the thing on my phone.
Likewise.
You know, I'm going on like, oh, that fucking TikTok, I'll never be into that. I'm doing it on YouTube.
Right.
Anyway.
Just a different platform for the same kind of thing. Yeah, no, that's something that I definitely noticed and been concerned about too. Is just like, I guess to some degree that's just the inevitable fact of capitalism or whatever. But like, you know, over time, like these things that were once very kind of like pure DIY, like individual run kind of aspects of the internet, like are just being taken over by big corporations. And the fact that like to relate it back to noise, it seems like most noise kind of discussion and connection that happens online happens through Instagram nowadays, which again like is this big faceless corporation, and it used to be like individual forums that people that kind of discussion happened online, and it seems like yeah, there are forums that are still active, but the main place is Instagram, you know.
Yeah. Like I reluctantly returned to Instagram after like, you know, I said like I'm never using this shit app ever again. I'm deleting my account. And you know, like when you deactivate your Instagram, it gives you like 30 days to come back. I was like 20 days in, and I thought like, my brand, you know, I should come back.
Yeah. Well, it's the kind of thing where like you feel like you have to be a part of it just because that's how you can connect to these people. Well, like what other opportunity, like what other option is there?
It's definitely like it sucks because yeah, Johnny, I mean I feel the same kind of way very much and that was something that I did get to fully experience because my family bought a computer when I was like 5 and I was basically on the internet from day one. So I got a lot of firsthand experience. I mean, obviously, again, not within this fucking particular world, but in the world of like that whole Web 1.0 experience and to some degree understanding and interacting with that more personalized landscape that the internet used to offer a lot more, seeking things out and finding niche interests and finding these places that felt, personally curated and making these connections and stuff that felt genuine because it was a smaller world in that sense. But, again, I mean, the state of it is now, it feels like it was just kind of an inevitability. We're kind of within it, and it's near impossible to, move away from it. But, and I think that also plays into something we talked about before this recording, where it's like Caden was just saying, like, the way these things work, they get consumed by capitalism or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I wholeheartedly believe that something like what people knew as quote unquote the counterculture, and I think noise can fit very much into that. A lot of what you would call that is no longer counterculture as much as it's just part of culture. It gets assimilated and it gets commodified. But I will say one of the, at least again in my opinion, the saving graces of something like noise is that it's much harder to commodify. There's definitely aspects of it that get commodified, and clearly through means that we're talking about right now, you could make an argument for it being part of that. But at the same time, I think it's it's one of the much harder things to really absorb and turn into a product. Thankfully, at least in that sense. I'll sit here and make a fucking argument as to why I think noise is one of the true last bastions of what you'd call punk. So
yeah, I think that fact alone makes it one of the truest, like, most pure art forms. The fact that, like, almost by its very nature, noise kind of rejects commercialization and profitability and embraces just like absurdism and what was the word, like
convention,
inconvenience, maybe, like with the packaging and with just like how you access it and stuff. Like it's just anti all of that, and that makes it very much like it's just about the art. It's not about making money. And that's
Yeah,
one of
it's-
the things I love the most about it.
It's kind of hard to imagine like a watered down version of noise. Like I'm sure it exists, but like it's much easier to imagine something like punk rock or like metal being watered down. But that's a
You
whole
don't
other
have to
can of
imagine it.
worms.
That's already happened.
Yeah. But like with regard to, Web 1.0 versus Bandcamp versus whatever, sometimes I see labels and stuff who like deliberately forego ease of access or accessibility. And I don't just mean like private releases. I mean, I was going to say I won't name names like it's shameful, but it doesn't really matter. I just saw some label recently on Instagram. There you go, Instagram. And they said something like new releases. Like this isn't anything special. It was like new releases out now. Email me to buy. Instead of just having a Bandcamp or having a web store, it was email me directly to purchase. That is, I think, very Web 1.0, like that's very... It's not particularly hard to do. It's not hard to send an email. It's certainly not like tape trading. I knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy. But just like the act of making it, you have to email me to buy this thing. And it's a real release. It's not private. It's accessible. You just got to email me. It's not on a website. There's no previews. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and people aren't used to that, like they're not. They're like, we have to email you individually to buy a thing. Like I just want to click
Even
a
that
thing on a
almost
website.
feels like a bit more effort in a way.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I know I'm gonna butcher the name, but whatever. The label Janus Hovard, that European
Yeah.
label. The guy, what's his name? Mikkel something. He has the project International.
International Zina.
Yeah,
Whatever.
Internazionale. Or I'm
Yeah.
fucking terrible. I'm sorry.
Something like that.
He made a Bandcamp at some point, and then he put his stuff on Bandcamp. But before that, yeah, you just had to email him. He had a newsletter.
I was subscribed to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I purchased stuff that way, where you just had to email him, and he'd give you a quote. And it's just funny to think about, like, why do we put stuff on Bandcamp? Like, hell yeah, it's awesome for streaming within the app, and like it makes purchasing stuff so simple. And you can configure all that stuff. You don't have to like work it out yourself. That's great and all. And I've done that with my label, and then I take a step back and I realize like all these other labels just did it before Bandcamp. They just managed without it. Why do we have to use it? I understand. It's great. I use it all the time. I have dozens and dozens of purchases and whatever. But sometimes I guess I have like a not like regret, but just thinking like what could have been if I didn't use Bandcamp. I don't mean this in a way where like I regret using it. It's just more like I just started using it because that's what other people did.
It's just convenient and
Yeah.
easy, makes sense.
I purchased stuff from Jeff Witcher from the label. I don't know if he runs it anymore. Salon. The guy behind Renee Hell. He had a fucking blog. It was just a blog, like on Blogspot, and it had a PayPal link. Buy my new CDRs. I bought stuff that way. That's just like a button on a website. It's not even a platform or anything.
And actually, too, really quick, because you just reminded me another label that seems to utilize Bandcamp in a unique way while still sort of maintaining that is 4IB, For Intrinsic Beliefs. They're the label who puts out a lot of the like Sutcliffe Eugen related stuff these days. And
Oh,
worked
yeah,
with
yeah.
a whole bunch of artists based out of Malaysia, I think, or Singapore. Sorry. But yeah, they do that where the Bandcamp, they upload when the album comes out, it's on there, and there's a buy link and everything for you to buy it, but you can only buy the physical, because the digital representation of it on Bandcamp is only short previews of every track on the album. So it's they're still using it, but it's in order to do that. And otherwise on their main website, it's those PayPal links, and they do like a short write up and have the pictures and everything.
Yeah, and there's different people that like there's different approaches to that kind of thing too, because there's the option where you can only have certain tracks available in an album to actually stream, and not the other ones. Like so some labels or artists will want to do that kind of thing where like you can hear a little bit, but to hear the rest you got to pay for a physical or just a download or whatever. And then other people just kind of are like, whatever, here it is, you can listen to it, I don't care about money. I don't think there's really one approach that's more valid than any other. Like I understand all the perspectives that go into that. Maybe we can start to talk about like the idea of, I don't know. So we were talking a lot in the last episode about physical releases and how that kind of adds a new like dimension and depth to a release when you have that kind of like physical art object aspect of it. But what about releases that totally forego that, or just purely digital, don't have any physical aspect to it? What are the pros and cons of that? What do you maybe like or dislike about that style of release?
Well, I think that a purely digital release means that all you've got to focus on is the music, and the art and the track titles and stuff. But there's no like accompanying paratextual information to support it. I was going to say something cynical like substantiate it, which is bad, but like if it's purely digital, then I guess there's less messing around in a way. Like it's just the music, there it is, go get it, it's my statement. Which I can respect. You see that a lot in like rap and hip hop. Imagine.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too.
Imagine like a rap mixtape, whatever, and they've done all the noise bullshit, like limited, weird packaging. Like it would never, ever, ever exist that way.
This is a little tangent, but there are some like labels that make like cassettes of various like underground rappers. Like Weather Guide Records come to mind. But it's like with that kind of stuff, I feel like it's all older stuff that the artist has already released digitally, like maybe a few years ago or whatever, and it just became like a fan favorite. So they're like, oh, let's make cassettes of this. It's not like that was like as it was released physically. I think that's like the difference there. But anyway.
I think too, like Johnny, maybe the antithesis to what you were just saying is like, because I agree with you entirely, but also like the doing the solely digital thing, and I think this could even lead into talking about like solely digital labels and solely digital artists and all that whole line we could go down very easily from here, but where it gives people the ability to just solely give their statement, give the art as it is, here it is, take it. At the same time, I think that's also probably part of what plays into the oversaturation of again, quantity over quality, things like that. Because I'm sure everyone who is into noise is very aware of a plethora of people that they consider this person just releases a fucking another such and such hours long Harsh Noise wall thing with a picture of a dead anime girl on the cover, and it's like they just sat at their computer and went into Audacity and turned a thing all the way up and called it an album. And
it goes both
there's
ways.
Two sides to it, but I mean I also like to look at that positive angle that you were talking about for sure.
It's funny you mention that, because like before, when we were talking about Web 1.0 versus whatever we're up to now, I think I have like a quite cynical, negative view of the internet in general, and part of that is exactly what you said. And so it's funny because for artists I like, if they put out something that's just purely digital, I will like happily listen to it and take it for what it is. It'd be cool if there was a physical, but it's not necessary. But then simultaneously, yeah, I am quite judgmental about like a lot of music and art that I see online. I'm no saint, you know. I'll go to a Bandcamp and I see there's 3,000 releases and they're all the same, basically. I don't care, like, but it's you know, I can't like pretend like and say, oh, I'm sure you had a great idea, or I'm sure you're a nice person, or I'm sure that you had an interesting perspective. I feel like, feel free to disagree with me. I feel like in order for art to be special, or any kind of media to be special, there has to be the accessibility to it has to be, it has to be a little bit hard to access it. And I don't mean like you have to go meet up with me at a certain time in a certain place and I will hand you a tape.
But just some level of effort.
Some effort,
you know,
yeah.
So there is a mutual transaction at the end of the day. And I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it is unfortunate in a way that I think this oversaturation of things like this, because I mean, let's admit it, at the end of the day, like, as much as we sit here, and, you know, I think I speak for all of us when I say, like, when we make things like Noise, we try to put effort and heart and soul and consider art. We put these things into it, and a lot of the artists that we respect within these genres and subgenres and whatever, we would like to at least assume that they do the same, you know, and so a lot of times as people who make it, I think we can hear that. But something like the oversaturation that comes from the ease of access, it unfortunately creates this predisposition in that way that probably, you know, if you think about it, diminishes a lot more people from checking out what could maybe arguably be more legitimate forms of the art form, just because the predisposition was settled within them because of their experience in that landscape of like, just 1,000 releases on this thing. It all just sounds like psh, and that's it. You know what I mean? It all becomes this like one thing, and now you're like, okay, well, I know I don't like this, and then someone sends you another thing that has the same label tags, and you go, oh, it's probably the same, you know. And I mean, you can't blame in a way, you know.
It's hard to sit here and like, you know, wholeheartedly say these things personally, because it sounds pretentious. It sounds like, well, my stuff it comes from the soul and it's better than them. Like, they probably cared too. They probably like believe in themselves like the same, if not more, than I do with my art, for example. So I hope it doesn't come across like I'm just saying like they're bad and I'm good.
Oh, yeah,
but
no.
It's like it's all right. Here's an example. Do you guys know DJ Sprinkles?
No.
They're like a legendary deep house producer from the US.
Oh, I think I have heard of them actually.
I think their name is Terry Tamlitz. Again, I probably butchered her name. He runs a label called Comatance, and they're very, very against digital streaming, digital distribution, like incessantly so. You go on their website, and there's like this whole thing about like, it's like a manifesto about like being against Spotify and being against streaming, and like even just downloads, even just like illegally downloading stuff. And I think that it is quite respectable to have such a strong opinion about that kind of thing in this day and age, because it's not like the guy from Metallica saying Napster hurts our sales. It's like it's like her point is more like this music comes from a really specific subjugated, oppressed sort of scene, being the, you know, queer sort of dance music scene in the 90s and whatever, and like the oppression that they face, and how keeping it like controlling the spread means that it's appreciated and perceived by people who would like receive, not necessarily like it or receive it well, but more like it's for a certain audience, or it's for a certain group. Because sometimes when I've downloaded stuff, you know, I'm listening to it, you know, as a nerd in my bedroom. I'm listening to it completely divorced of context. I'm listening to it like, I don't know the person, I don't know their ideas, I don't know their occupations. I'm there just like doing it whatever on my computer, and it's on in the background. And then I come away with it having learnt nothing or felt nothing. And I feel like that's quite sad. And obviously, you know, it's, you know, I could change my habits, but it's like I can respect what his ideas are then about controlling this stuff. And so I wonder, like, yeah, Bandcamp is great. It's great to put your stuff out there. It's great for other people to find your stuff, and like, it looks professional. It looks amazing. Genuinely, I genuinely mean this. But simultaneously, I wonder, like, is some magic lost? Is some...
Right.
Is
I think it's more
lost?
of like... I think you just have to take it on a case-by-case basis. You know, I don't think you can really make like a broad stroke, say like, you know, all this kind of like, you know, mass-produced harsh noise wall on Bandcamp sucks. Like, certainly a lot of it is not really worth anyone's time, but it's like, you know, you could say that about a lot of physical releases too, right? It's just like,
yeah,
it just depends. Because I can think of like, you know, to start talking about like net labels and that sort of thing. Like one label that I've released on and always kind of respected and thought was cool was Nature Noise Wall. Is this just like, you know, there's a lot of labels on Bandcamp like that where it's just a bunch of harsh noise wall, and there's a certain running theme throughout all of the cover art and, you know, track titles, whatever. But yeah, I don't know, just like that specific dedication to like nature, animals, stuff like that, and just seeing like how you can make walls somehow relate to that in one way or another. I just think that's cool. It's like a very focused aesthetic, and like I respect that kind of thing, even though a lot of those releases probably did take like a very short amount of time to make.
Yeah,
but,
and that's
you know.
that's why I didn't want to like get on my high horse too much, because I think the discussion about labor equating quality.
Oh no, yeah,
that's awful. That is such a bad slippery slope.
I for sure don't want to put across the idea that I'm saying like just because, you know, such and such means that this thing automatically must have soul and this thing must not. You know what I mean? That's definitely not always the case. I guess the big thing that is that sucks a little bit is just that we all know for a fact there's plenty of people out there. I mean, I remember watching a video where someone's like, let's see how easy it is for me to make a noise album and get people to review it and care about it.
Yeah,
and
that's
blah, blah, blah.
lame.
And that's, I mean, but that's a very much a real thing that exists. People are doing it, and you know, they're doing that with everything, but you know, it's out there, and it just sucks because something like that does, you know, ruin recess for the rest of the class. You know what I mean? It's because yeah, I mean, we want to sit here and make sure that we're making it apparent that we're not trying to, you know, be entirely susceptible to those predispositions as much as we can try to avoid it. But at least for the more of the general public or what have you, you know, people in general, you got to admit, like, that's just the reality that a lot of people are going to go into things with those predispositions. And unfortunately, in worlds like this, that's just how that stuff gets set sometimes, is because the stuff like that does exist, you know.
I think like
there's plenty of it
with noise in particular, like the fact that unless you're really deep into it and you have a lot of experience with it, you've listened to a lot of stuff, it's very hard to tell what is good noise and what's bad noise, right? Because there's no objective parameters of like what that even means, right? So when you first discover noise, you're just going to be like, well, it's all just noise. How do I even determine like what is worth listening to and what's not, right? When it's like almost supposed to be this kind of like difficult, unpenetratable thing. I don't know, but like,
yeah, it's a personal journey.
Yeah.
yeah, like it's just like if you care and you're invested enough, then you'll listen to it. You'll develop your own taste, and you'll figure out what you like and what you don't like. But
And I mean,
yeah.
I'll say to definitely bring it back there too. Things like, I mean, you can say now things like Bandcamp or other streaming services, they give that ability more accessibly to a lot of people to be able to explore those worlds at will. Because yeah, like, I mean, we want to mythologize and romanticize these times that we don't even have personal experience with, for better or for worse. But at least now you can really go out there and with the search of a simple keyword or maybe an artist that you already know you like, you can discover entire fucking, you know, caves worth of things that you otherwise would have never found, and it's out there, and you're given the access to explore it and form your own opinions and you know what I mean, have that journey that otherwise wouldn't have been as easy.
Obviously, like
shape your tastes.
Yeah. Obviously, our disposition is like shaped based upon our age and upbringing and society and stuff. So, you know, a younger person might mythologize pre-internet times and say whatever, you know. But then for someone who was, you know, alive and living and active in pre-internet times, they probably think the internet's awesome. They probably think like, dude, do you remember when we like had a question and we couldn't get an answer ever?
Right.
You know, like,
Right.
what's the population of a certain country? Well, I mean, we could go down to the library and find out.
Or you just take a fucking shot in the dark.
Or take a shot in the dark, you know? So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely pros and cons. One thing with Caden, what you were saying about nature noise wall, I've come across like some hyper specific noise wall projects on Bandcamp, and I'm like completely locked into the vibe and the theme, and it's so cool. It's like that was impossible before. That was impossible before the internet, you know.
Yeah, and like, you know, to maybe like pivot into that more specifically, like I think Harsh Noise Wall and Bandcamp they're almost like interconnected in a very fundamental way.
Yeah.
And like, you know, to for anyone who's maybe not aware of the full history of that, like, you know, Harsh Noise Wall, I mean, the big three of that are probably like Richard Ramirez kind of doing some of that in the 90s, and then the Rita coming through with like his very specific themes of like, you know, ballet, women's feet, sharks, that kind of thing. And then Vamir kind of like really solidifying it as like a movement with an aesthetic, with a philosophy behind it, rather, like a very specific like set of standards of like what this is and how it's different from just noise in general. And from that, taking influence from those artists, it just spawned this entire scene, this like sub scene within noise that, you know, certainly there's plenty of physical noise wall releases, but, you know, it definitely primarily exists on Bandcamp. And yeah, maybe part of that is just because it's easy to make and upload, and just, you know, you can keep churning it out at a rapid pace, and that's what a lot of people like to do. But yeah, like the whole thing with hyper specific themes being attached to noise wall, I think is really interesting, because that's something that is, I don't know, something kind of new and sort of specific to that. Just like, yeah, because like you have Nature Noise Wall, and you have a lot of people who are kind of copying the Rita stuff with talking about, you know, just like feet worship or whatever, stuff like themed around horror movies, or there's like it's just such insanely specific things. There's one that's like themed around Montclair coats or whatever. It's just like every release is like a different. Yeah.
I'm an opaque stan, by the way.
I love stuff like that, because it's like, that is the pure essence of like taking some really niche, specific, weird thing that you're like really into and that pretty much everyone else doesn't really care about, doesn't really pay much attention to, and just like hyper focusing on that. And I guess just like attaching a theme like that to something like Noise Wall that's very just nondescript and there's nothing really associated with it that comes to mind. But when you attach that kind of imagery to it, then it kind of gives it this new life in a way.
It's funny. It's funny you mention that because, like, I completely agree. As soon as you said the Montclair Coat project, I was like, "Yeah, that's. I know what you're talking about. I have some of his tapes, and on the inside it says, oh my god, what does it say? It says like puffy, shiny, fetish noise wall." Yep, yes, it is. You know,
That's awesome.
but it's funny because like. I go between really liking that and also really hating it. Like really, like it's so hypocritical. You know, I'll find a theme or a project that I'm into, and I love it, and I want to hear all of it. And then there's one that I'm sort of not into, and I see that there's like 45 albums, and I'm like, I don't care. You know?
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
it's
that's fine,
hypocritical.
and that's just what I was saying about it's just like a case by case basis. You can't really say all that stuff is good or all of it's bad. You know, it's just whatever resonates with you.
It is very interesting though, and I that's definitely like an internet thing, as in like, there's lots of like, you know, microcultures and tiny niches and micro genres and stuff that wouldn't have happened without the internet, essentially. And seeing stuff like that stuff on Bandcamp is just like an obvious extension of it. And I remember watching this interesting video on YouTube once about this guy who was sort of like, it was like more of a philosophical argument. He was sort of like critiquing the idea that people are too much into like the minutia and details of things instead of like the grand story. Say like a book or a movie or whatever. People will be really into like the world building or like a character's backstory and like what planet they're from and like their siblings and the tiny little things rather than like the grand narrative. And I just that just sort of came to mind when we were talking about this. Not saying he's correct, but it's something that has stayed with me. I wonder, like in this case, if the grand narrative would be Vormir coming out with Claustration and being like, that's it, that's the end point of Noise. What else could you do? And then the hyper-specific, hyper-focused minutia people being like, what if I made it about nature? What if I made it about black holes and nebulas and stars? What if I made it about feet? I don't know.
Right, like
You
taking
know.
this thing that's presented as like the most extreme like end wall, like literally hitting the wall, you know, not being able to progress any further, and then trying to find ways around that to keep, you know, progressing it in different directions. It's interesting.
What do you guys think about like Bandcamp shaping consumption of noise, tastes of noise? Because obviously we've all used it. Obviously it's here
Yeah.
to stay. What does
Well,
that
I was also
mean?
thinking like to kind of like continue on with the noise wall discussion and sort of bring in like something we were talking about earlier. The idea of like presenting very long or just like something that just takes a lot of time and patience and dedication to kind of like fully experience, and like how much you can expect from an audience to actually like engage with that, I guess. That's something that I think is maybe more relevant with Bandcamp than ever before, because you can just upload like, you know, these insanely long albums or whatever, and with very little effort. You don't even necessarily have to take as much time as the album is to like create it, you know. Like there's Bull of Heaven, for example, who've made these like insanely like multi-year long projects or whatever just by nesting files in each other. Like I don't know, there's different ways of doing it, but like yeah, I guess I don't really know how to like come up with a specific question based on that, but yeah, just
Well, it's, you know, it's making me think too that if you want to put something like Bandcamp, for instance, in the wheelhouse of like considering it like a social media platform or what have you, it's kind of an interesting case for something like that, because it almost feels like these days you could argue that social media is almost designed for sort of the lack of patience, and they're pushing more in that direction, just with the way that things exist. And I would say maybe like the other alternative in the same wheelhouse could be something like YouTube, where obviously you can make short things, but it gives a platform for people to make long things, such as Caden's recent essay on Ruben Slick.
Check it out.
But Bandcamp's an interesting one because, yeah, there's, especially for people who use it for things like noise or more long form, somewhat abstract genres and micro genres and whatever, you know, ambient and experimental, whatever you want to throw it under. There is a lot of that on there, and there's a lot of an audience that use it specifically for that stuff. And I don't know, it just feels kind of interesting in that it is another one of these current platforms that's gives the ability to subvert kind of the status quo in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. The status quo being like, like just more and more, like having like fractured attention spans and just kind of like prioritizing, just like constantly flicking through different things,
right?
And being stimulated by
and like
just
trying to pull attention as quick
content.
and immediately as possible with the thing you're trying to get at, and then move on to the next.
There's definitely value in just rejecting that and kind of going to the polar opposite of just like, I'm going to listen to, harsh noise for 3 hours at a time or whatever,
And I would say what really like almost aids that in a big way is the ability to not just experience it through the app or the website, but to have the option to download it in whatever format you see fit that they offer. And therefore, put it onto your device or your computer or whatever you want to use, burn a fucking CD of it. Now you have it and you can take it in that way. And it really gives this option for the people who consume these things in that way, which is cool. I don't know.
Yeah, like everything said about Bandcamp, the fact is that it is the most popular direct download website. Mm-hmm. Is it? It must be. It must be.
I mean, it's one of the very small handful of options, I would say.
So, like, just for that, it's amazing because, I mean, dude, imagine Spotify one day said, why don't you buy this album? We'll give it to you as an MP3. On every album page, there was just a buy link. That's like completely impossible to comprehend, So, yeah, and also like what with you were saying, Caden, about like noise, as like a rejection of short attention spans and stuff. I mean, that's true. That's true. I mean, look at how many noise albums are just one track and it's like an hour long or whatever. You can't really, pause and remember where you were up to. I mean, you can, but then you have to like remember the time where you stopped.
And it's almost pointless, honestly.
Yeah, like, so it is a rejection in that sense. It's kind of funny though that like, when it comes to Bandcamp noise, I think of Harsh Noise Wall. I don't think of just like noise rock, harsh noise. It's specifically Harsh Noise Wall, and I don't know why. And also like really long albums. Yeah,
I think that's kind of just like what what I was saying about like Bandcamp kind of opened the gates to be able to just like create endless amounts of long form content, long form audio, and be able to upload that make it very easy and convenient. And I think that just naturally lends itself to something like Harsh Noise Wall, which is like, I don't know, it's like, are you even really like necessarily meant to listen to the entire thing every time. I'm sure most people who kind of listen to Harsh Noise Wall and Bandcamp will just kind of listen to a little bit, like skim through or whatever. Like probably not too many people are really sitting down and dedicating themselves to the entire block of time, however long it might be. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's just one of those things that existed, like this whole scene developed because of Bandcamp, I think. And it's like, that's what enabled that to even be possible in a way.
It also could be that this is like a very specific micro niche thing that we are like sort of making it out to be bigger than it actually is. Because
well, I mean, noise in general is not very big, but
yeah. But it's funny because like as soon as I said that thing before about how when I think of noise on Bandcamp, it's specifically these really long form Harsh Noise Wall things with specific whatever. It made me think like, holy shit, I can't think of just normal noise on Bandcamp. I don't think of it in that way. I think of it like a label just doing stuff. This stuff is like mostly, I feel like it's mostly individuals doing this sort of thing. I mean, there are labels, but it's just like made me question my perception or maybe prejudice about it, honestly.
I mean, I think there's a lot of labels and artists who use Bandcamp as just kind of like another platform, but not necessarily like the primary focus, right? Like they'll sell physicals elsewhere, or they'll have maybe other sites that they put their music on, but Bandcamp is just kind of like another one. Whereas like for that kind of like noise wall scene, it's more like Bandcamp is the platform they upload it on. They don't really even care about anywhere else or making physicals or anything. It's just like all Bandcamp exclusive,
Do you think that devalues it in a way?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think you can really make a blanket statement like that. Like, I think it just depends on a case-by-case basis. Like, certainly, like, there's something to be said for, quantity over quality or whatever, and just kind of being oversaturated with too many releases and not being able to, listen to a lot of them. But I just feel like that's kind of inevitable. It's like, you can't really blame that on a specific platform. Like, and yeah, I think especially with the internet, and as you mentioned, like a lot of before, like a lot of rappers taking that kind of approach of just like they just kind of record a bunch of stuff off the top, freestyles, whatever, and just upload all of it without really any care. Like that's the artist that I made that video essay on, Ruben Slick. Like that's definitely his approach, where he just kind of records everything he makes, puts it all out there, doesn't really care if it's good or not. It's just kind of like an endless stream of like what's coming from him. But I don't think that devalues it necessarily, because in certain cases, like that is a very like genuine, pure expression of just like who that person is. It's just like flowing out of them naturally, and it's like they don't really have to put time or effort into it because they're just naturally talented, or like they're just it just happens naturally. It's like a natural process. I don't know. But then there's definitely other instances where it's like, it's obvious that this person wasn't really into it. They didn't really like have their heart into it. They're just kind of like doing it because it's a thing to do, like whatever. They don't really care that much. And it's hard to tell, of course, but yeah, it's like, I don't think that kind of quantity over quality approach is necessarily bad. I think it can be indicative of a very pure, genuine kind of expression. But
yeah.
There's like, I guess my hesitation towards, fully saying that this stuff is awesome and, I wholeheartedly love it is because I guess Harsh Noise Wall is one of the genres where I can see how by the numbers it can get. Like there's a lot of projects I've come across where the tracks are specifically 30 minutes long, 30 minutes and 0 seconds long. It's 2 tracks, like an A and a B. Or it's specifically an hour, or it's specifically, 45 minutes. And it kind of just seems like churned out at that point, and I guess I prefer. I guess like at that point to me, it's like you had a cool idea. I get it's like about sound textures and stuff. I get it. I love noise for that reason. I love aural textures and stuff like that. But it makes me wonder, why did it have to be 45 minutes? Like, okay, duration. Again, it's just sort of a convention. I guess like for a lot of this Bandcamp, fuck, I'm even saying it as a pejorative. I'm even saying it like Bandcamp noise. I guess it just seems like by the numbers, it seems like, okay, here's a sound, and I like the sound, but I guess it's got to be an hour long. You know, it couldn't have been a minute or 5 minutes, and you did like 20 tracks that would 5 minutes long or something.
Well, it's a lot of people just kind of like taking direct influence from other people who have already done that and just not really adding their own ideas to it. They're just kind of like, well, this is how it has been done, so I'll just do that. And you know, I don't think that's too interesting because you're just kind of copying what other people have already done before you.
Yeah.
But it also kind of gets into like, you know, I feel like a lot of that noise wall stuff is more, it's more conceptual, right? It's more focused on the theme. And like, yeah, there's the noise, but it's like, especially for the absurdly long ones, it's like, are you really meant to actually listen to all of that? Or is it more just like, you're meant to see it, maybe listen to some of it, kind of take in the idea behind it, like the concept, the theme, whatever, and be like, all right, that was my experience of that art, you know, moving on, right? Like,
yeah.
Whereas I feel like for more other types of noise, generally, it's more like you're actually meant to listen to it as an album, like front to back kind of thing, if that makes sense.
I definitely do agree about the concept part, because I also find the concept behind these releases to be more interesting than actually listening to them. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's almost like the music is just sort of incidental. And I understand that it's part of the convention, but like there's some projects where I almost get more out of just looking through the releases and like looking at the cover art and the titles and stuff more than actually listening to it. Because at that point it's sort of like poetry or maybe just like art or something.
It's visual art, yeah.
Yeah. And like I genuinely enjoy that. Like I remember for a while thinking I was going to do my own Harsh Noise Wall project, and it was going to be themed around some specific media. I don't want to say it in case I end up doing it, because I still think the idea is sort of cool. But like the idea is that it was supposed to be, they were supposed to be packaged like medicine. It was going to be like 6 mini CDs, and it was supposed to be like there was A, B, C, D, E, F, and they were supposed to be like taken, like dosed out, like 6 doses in increasing concentration or whatever, and like the packaging was going to be like a box of medicine, and like I saved some of my own, you know, medication boxes, so I get like graphic design inspiration, and like that's cool, and I can definitely see, like, you know, going back to physical media and like why noise people are crazy for packaging and whatever. I remember when I used to have Facebook in the Harsh Noise Wall group, all these people are super into it. Like they all believe in it, man. They're all into like the super conceptual whatever, and yeah, noise is cool as well. So it was almost like just the noise and like the concept and art just happened to complement each other. And I do appreciate that. I guess this is just like one of the few avenues by which, you know, this manifests in this way. And what other genres would you have, like, you know, like really impressionistic titles or an album cover or something that are mostly like uniform in theme, and like the tracks are vaguely similar? I can't really think of it. You can't. Maybe techno. I don't know.
It's interesting because, yeah, I mean, I guess, and who's to say this hasn't always existed in some form? But I guess something like Bandcamp and these online platforms just give more accessibility because of, taking away factors like cost and stuff. Something like that, I mean, you could argue it's almost its own just art form, full stop.
Right.
It's a way that a style of art that someone could be, presenting, that's its medium is through a noise release. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the noise itself as the art. That's just one of the parts of the mixed media involved in the piece of art that they're presenting to you. And I think, things like Bandcamp and doing all this, it just makes the ability to do that not only more accessible and possible for a lot of people, but also like get ideas like that across to people who otherwise wouldn't have considered it in the first place. Which, could mean, and I'm sure this is very much the case a lot of the time, it creates a lot of, I guess the negative way to put it would be copycats, but it also gives the ability to probably influence people beyond that with that idea of like, well, there's a whole world of this out there that's accessible, and this is, how it exists, and this is the art that they produce. And it could inspire people to be doing things just because that exists. I don't know. Yeah, I honestly, right now, this conversation is like really hitting me in a way that Harsh Noise Wall never has before. Not to say that I'm going to go out there and check all the Bandcamp Harsh Noise Wall out now all of a sudden, but it's giving me a little bit of a level of appreciation that I have not legitimately had before this hour.
Yeah. And I liked what you're saying about it almost being like a new art form, and it's kind of like, it's like a lot of these artists are kind of like taking the framework of the structure of Bandcamp and like using that to create, to like present their own type of like artistic display. Like,
right.
Like Johnny, when you were saying like, you get a lot more out of like scrolling through all the releases that have a similar aesthetic or layout or whatever.
Or like reading the titles or looking at the cover art or reading about the concept.
Like that's probably intentional in a lot of cases, that like that is your first experience or like interaction with that project, is you're like just scrolling through Bandcamp, and the way everything's laid out with like the album covers and squares and titles, and just the way everything's structured, it becomes like an art piece in itself.
Bandcamp itself also gives the ability as the uploader to add supplementary material when you download it, you know what I mean? Other files and this and that, bonus tracks, other images, text file, like whatever you want to stick in there that's not immediately obvious on the page until you personally decide, I'm going to download this.
Yeah, that's a good feature.
I think this is probably the coolest part about Harsh Noise Wall on Bandcamp for me. Because there is so much potential to do some really cool stuff, like using Bandcamp as your canvas, rather than like, rather than like doing an album in like the more traditional way of like, I'm going to record it, here's the tracks, here's the cover, there's a JPEG, there you go. What if like imagine this? Imagine like a project, and like all the albums were themed as if it was a narrative. Like you listen to them from the earliest one to the latest one or something, and then they never upload anything again. It's like one project on one page. And maybe you could say, this is my new... It's almost like an ARG in a sort of way. Like an alternate reality game. But like entirely on Bandcamp. And like what you were saying, Slater, about like supplementary material. Imagine... I'm just thinking now, like imagine if you had an album where it's like, you go to the thing, and there's like one track that's 1 second long, but you download it, and then there's like this whole other stuff, and they're all bonuses. Like that's where the real album is or something.
Oh yeah.
That would be cool. Like there's a lot of potential for this, and like I'm a big horror fan, and I've loved seeing what people do with horror these days, like especially on YouTube and the internet, and Flash animations and stuff when I was a kid. you know, in the past, it'd be like a movie or a book. But then, like, you know, you see a horror flash animation when you're 8 years old and it changes everything. Speaking for myself, you know.
No, I'm right there with you.
So, like, imagine that kind of thing with Bandcamp. Imagine, like, if people started using Bandcamp in, like, a more impressionistic sort of way. That's why
There's a lot of interactive elements to fuck with, yeah.
Yeah, like, this is what I was saying before about Web 1.0. I feel like that kind of thing where people could customize their own websites and, like...
Right.
That is so cool. You could do all this amazing, uniquely internet-based sort of stuff rather than, like...
working within the framework
Yeah.
that you're kind of limit. But to be honest with you, now that we're talking about this, even with something like Bandcamp, and I think Instagram is already a perfect example of this because plenty of people do this, but Bandcamp, and I'm sure people have done this as well, you could even do it in more conventional means too, of like the way you make your album covers, they're all part of a single larger picture, and something like Bandcamp that gives you the ability to customize to some degree your layout, at least so that the thumbnails are arranged in a particular way, things like that. Like there's a lot of potential for that kind of stuff, even within the limitations of, you know, the platform provided. And I think sometimes, I mean, people always say one of the best things to do as a creative person is work within a box, work within limitations, because then you start figuring out how to, you know, subvert that and how to find loopholes and how to like utilize the tools that you're given to do something wholly original, even with, you know, a hard cap on certain aspects of it.
That's definitely a good point. I never really like thought about it that way. Yeah, like you know, working within the context of Bandcamp or Instagram or something, it's like that kind of forces you to find ways to make it your own, to make it more original. But I also feel like it gets to a point where you do kind of hit a wall, or you're kind of like, all right, I don't know what else to do with this. And so you kind of, eventually there has to be something else that we collectively move on to.
Yeah.
But
I think by the nature of, you know, the amount of people that can interact with that kind of format, though, it does still give a lot of possibility. I mean, one person could be doing that in a harsh noise wall setting, and another person could be doing essentially the same thing in a fucking ambient setting, but I mean, you know, it's like, oh, it's presented in the same way and it's approached the same way, but it is still, at the end of the day, it's like a slightly different, you know what I mean? Like, it does still give a little bit of leeway, but yeah, there's definitely going to be a hard cap on that at some point, but also ideally at some point there's going to be another platform, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I guess for this stuff, like, it is just sort of a theoretical exercise, because I can talk about, let's push the boundaries of Bandcamp or whatever, but I guess that's just more like, because Bandcamp is meant for just conventional usage. It is meant for just, you know, the album format, you know, here's a group of songs under an idea, and they're represented by a picture. Every platform can do that, right? I just think, like, in the context of Harsh Noise Wall, because people are already going so hard with the concept stuff, go further. Why not go further? Why not, like, fuck with the website in a way? I'm not talking SQL injections and stuff. I'm talking, like, you know, a project where all the releases are, like, meant to be a story or something, and then never do anything again with that project. Go to another thing.
Right. Or
I remember,
here's a free idea, make every album cover a section of a QR code, and then when you decide to download them all, you have to put them together in fucking Photoshop, and then you can take a picture, and that takes you to the...
I remember there was a Dungeon Synth label. I wish I remembered the name. Anyway, there was a Dungeon Synth label, and they had a website that was like Web 1.0, whatever. It was just their HTML sort of website. It wasn't on another thing. And they had, you know, like, conventional releases. And at the very bottom of the page, they had a picture of a tree. And you could click under the tree. There was, like, a clickable area under the tree, but it was invisible. But you could click it. And if you clicked it, it would take you to, like, this secret part of the website where there was, like a sub-label. There was, like, more releases. but it was like a hidden thing, like a sort of secret, and like no digital, no previews, just have to buy them from the guy directly. And I thought that was really cool, like an Easter egg sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess I could relate this back to talking about, noise on the internet, art on the internet, culture, everybody on the internet, in a sort of way that sort of thing, like, simulates a pre-internet magic. I knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy sort of way, because Caden, we're both hospital production stans. We like look at the Discogs and we see random releases showing up and we don't know how they got there and where they came from. I would love to know where they came from. I'd love to know, Slater, if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, basically, this label, there has to be some kind of private in-group or like private releases that they show up on Discogs. They show up like just these random releases that like were never advertised anywhere to my knowledge, and they just show up and we're like, what the hell is this thing?
Right.
This whole Dungeon Synth label, click the invisible box, sort of like, you can do that, but like I don't know, it is sort of like that pre-internet secret magic thing that people love to romanticize, except it seems more natural, I guess, on the internet. Like, imagine, the Instagram version would be like getting a DM from a mysterious account, but like you'd just think it's spam. Like you'd never open it, right? I just think that like, because we're so on the internet, we could be doing so many cool things, but we're just bound by like these 4 websites that everybody uses.
Right.
Yeah, there's so much potential for creativity.
No, it's a good point. I think like in my ideal world as well, I share a lot of your sentiments, and like I would love to see more of that, because it does offer just like a much more creativity for people, and it's much more personal kind of thing. Because we could sing the praises for things like Bandcamp and stuff all day, and honestly I do, because it is, I've been utilizing it for easily half my life now, almost. I can't remember exactly when I started. It was in high school, but it's it's been around, and hasn't changed a whole lot, but it's what it needs to be. But it would be cool to see people doing more things. Like, honestly, making a website these days, I feel like not enough people go out of their way for this, but it is exponentially so much easier than it used to be. Like, my own website is I just made it on Google Sites, which is just automatically available through having a Gmail account and going on Google Drive. And I bought a domain, but depending on what domain you want, that can, what do I spend? $20 a year? You know what I mean? Which is like amazing. That's insanely affordable. And when I first got it, it was like 2 years for $2 a year or something like that. Like, there's so many, there's so much potential for people to really get into doing that. And then Google Sites, like at its base level, it's sort of a very uniform style of building a website, but it still gives you the option to, use HTML or any other script language you want to use. And even at the base level, there's a lot of flexibility. And you don't have to go out there and like completely, write a website code from the ground up anymore, but still have a lot of the freedom of things like what you were just describing. But yeah, I think like, just people in general are so hardwired to kind of focus solely on these like handful of social media based platforms as like that's the be all end all of the internet, and they're all sort of, those are the ones that are automatically formatted for use with a cell phone. A lot less people have home computers these days too, because they don't really need them. But yeah, fuck, I would love to see that as more of a thing, see more people kind of going out of their way, because even the people, it seems, who are kind of rejecting Bandcamp still have things like a Big Cartel or something, you know what I mean? Like, they're still using some other platform that's sort of standardized.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to like say for sure which direction it'll go, because on one hand it's like, with people being more I don't know, inundated with the internet, being more familiar with how to use it, like you'd think more people would be creating their own websites and just kind of and yeah, like curating this whole, like, because you can make a website like a whole artistic experience in and of itself, right? But at the same time, it seems like there's been this increasing trend towards just like convenience and just kind of like doing whatever everybody else is doing, right? Just kind of falling in line with these specific platforms. So I don't know. I think in a way that'll kind of like weed out, like who is really in it,
As
who
always,
really cares
yeah.
about it, versus people who are just kind of popping their head in and not really too invested.
Yeah. It just seems like, with how much we've talked about noise being the last true counterculture and like one of the few absolutely pure forms of expression, it just seems to me that, like, if you're going to have an internet presence, wouldn't you go make your own website? Wouldn't you go completely design that? I understand why people don't get me wrong, because no one, like, you can beg on your knees, please go look at my website.
Right.
1% of people will. I get that.
Right,
Everybody's
right.
already on Instagram and stuff. I get it. Fine. I just think it's like, it would be so cool if there was some labels doing these really interesting websites, having a fucking invisible link, having
100%.
whatever. I love that shit so much. It just seems like a no-brainer in a way, like...
I think it almost goes perfectly hand in hand too, because I think there's a case to be made that as someone who makes noise, a lot of times you almost also have to beg on your hands and knees for someone to even listen to your thing, even if you give them the most convenient means to do so.
I know.
Right?
I know.
So at that point, I feel like it's just like, just fucking lean into it. Fucking follow that thread. Like, yeah, let's all go out and fucking make a website. Fuck it. Because at least it's like someone statistically may come across it or click on that link I sent them, just like they already kind of are, and I'm already experiencing it anyway. Like, I'm already used to disappointment.
They're already checking out my Bandcamp.
Right,
I may as well
right.
make a fucking website.
And that goes, into the idea that, like, ideally at the end of the day, hopefully this stuff is you're doing it for yourself. I mean, you're doing it because you want to.
Yeah.
And I think, there's so many more convenient tools these days that are just right there, fucking handed to us for free. I think it's like, why not? Why
Shout out NeoCities and Zonelets. They're my favorite.
and freewebs.com.
Yeah, NeoCities for hosting, Zonelets for all the HTML formatting. You just copy paste and you put it in, and it's like looks nice, and you can learn a bit of HTML on the way. You learn how to make your hyperlinks glow. Come on, man. Who doesn't love a fucking glowing hyperlink? Don't at me.
Yeah, I mean, I can also see the perspective of like certain artists just being like, I just want to make my art. I don't want to have anything to do with the internet. Like, some people just don't really care about like writing HTML and like making websites and doing anything online really, and they just want to like make what they make and kind of focus on that. So yeah, but I think for people who like are literate in that kind of stuff and have the ability to make websites or like the knowledge to, I guess, then yeah, it's like, why not kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said a couple times, it's a case-by-case basis. And I think, I mean, I can only speak from myself, but, I'm someone who enjoys just making stuff. And I like making what I consider art. And I hope to, get my hands in a little bit of all these different kinds of mediums. And so I think that, and it's part of that is because, I think music has always been my main thing. But I think, a lot of stuff we talk about really push this point home, that a lot of those different forms of art play well off of each other. And you know, when you have full creative control over the entire, you know, fucking thing in itself, it's fun to just, you know, tinker at that shit and try and do that. I mean, I know a lot of these people, Bandcamp is a big one, is, you know, so many of us sit down and we'll make the album art, you know what I mean, and that's a part of the process, and it's very easy to do, you know, at least to make something that fits the requirements. But, you know, I mean, it's like you already have probably some experience with that stuff. It's just, you know, it's just adding that extra layer. But again, yeah, it's a case-by-case basis. Not everybody wants to do it, but I think more people should check it out, at least, because I think not enough people do it. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Something
that also... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You go, Caden. I'll remember mine.
Well, I was just something that came to mind. I think like when Johnny, you were talking about the idea of a project where you just like, it's like chronological order or whatever, and then you're done. You don't return to it. I think that is something noteworthy about the noise scene, is that a lot of people, instead of having just one primary like alias that they release all their stuff under, they'll have tons of different names, right? Like so many different aliases, projects, bands, I guess, like projects with other people. It's just a very different approach than it is in other genres. Like with, you know, something like rock or metal, it's like you're in a band with other people, like that's your project is that band, versus like if you're like a rapper or like a pop musician, like that's just like you, that's your identity, you know, there's no other projects, it's just like you're that person, right? But with noise, it's like, I guess maybe because of and a lot of them are anonymous too, but like, yeah, they're just, people tend to make a lot of different projects for specific themes, specific sounds, specific concepts, and it's more like fragmented in these different aliases, and I just think that's something that's kind of maybe not unique to noise specifically, but definitely a common thing you'll find within noise.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's probably one of the best parts about noise, is like, because, all right, you've just made me have a brainwave. We've been talking about like Harsh Noise Wall on Bandcamp being super thematic and specific. We've been talking about the internet being a way to, like, as an avenue to facilitate your creativity. Now that you've mentioned that that noise people have a bunch of projects and aliases, I feel like there is such fertile ground for those three things to just mix, like,
Oh yeah.
completely. Like, you know, Richard Ramirez. Do you know that he has a Blogspot blog for lots of his projects?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so fucking cool to me. Like, I remember going to the one for Falk, which is his one about, like, the Bigfoot. It's not Bigfoot. Like, one of the
Sasquatch or whatever. Yeah.
one of those guys, one of those cryptids. And you go to it, and it's like, the page is, like, black with, like, small white text and, like, scary JPEGs. It's like, I love that shit, man. It's so cool. Yeah, and absolutely about, like, the different aliases for different projects and themes. I completely agree. It's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it really lends itself to having various masks, because I think from the get-go, noise it's a very, like, depersonalized genre of music. You know what I mean? Like, with a lot of music, especially rap is a perfect example. Like you said, it's the people are presenting themselves as themselves. They have to kind of carry that with their persona or whatever it is, and but even with a lot of other genres, you know, it's very a lot of the time it's very focused on the fact that these are people. You see the people, they present themselves aesthetically in some way, but there's people behind it all the time, especially if you're using like instruments and this and that, or your voice. You're giving this very human aspect to what you're creating, and people recognize that. And on the other hand, so with something like noise, and I feel like you can, again, because Johnny, you bring this in a lot, and there's a lot of obvious parallels, so this is definitely one of them with a lot of electronic music. It's like a more of a depersonalized landscape, where you hear noise, and it's like there's always that joke of like, oh, did you listen to your washing machine or your dishwasher and put distortion on it? And it's like, yeah, it could be that, because it's like the humanity or the person a lot of times is very much removed, and I think that something like that gives automatically so much more freedom to explore all these different names and personas and masks, because it's like easy to do at that point, and you know what I mean, because it's about how you present it, not so much how you present yourself, because it's not yourself so much of the time.
The presentation becomes part of the art object, and that's where I feel like there's so much space to do this with Bandcamp and whatever other digital. Actually, not necessarily like streaming, because I feel like I don't use streaming, so I don't completely know how it works. But like, I know on some websites, actually Google does this. If you look up sometimes if you look up an artist by their real name, it'll say, how does it work? You look up an artist by like one of their aliases, wherever it automatically pulls that information into another area. Like, on Google, how it has that automatic information box thing on the right side, it'll get it wrong. Like, it'll pull like the wrong name or something. Or like when you Shazam a song, it'll say, anyway. So I just feel like noise is so interesting in this regard. Like, it's so interesting that there is this hyper specificity in like concept and theme and that kind of thing. And I guess before the internet, it was harder to sort of like sell yourself in that way. You'd maybe get like a mailing list upcoming things, and like, oh, I recognize that name. It's another one of this project. But then you only learn later when you go on Bandcamp and Discogs, and you see 300 aliases. That's the same guy. Yeah,
that's definitely one of the most fun parts of getting into noise, discovering all the artists, is like you like might hear two different projects and not realize that they were the same person until like years later or something, and you just like make all these connections. But yeah, I think also like part of that idea of having multiple projects and a lot of them being anonymous and that sort of thing, it kind of goes along with like, I guess the ego aspects being removed to some degree in noise, definitely compared to something like rap, almost.
And honestly,
where that's almost like the ego is the most important
within
thing,
it.
right?
Yeah.
That's almost like when people do attach the ego to it, it's like a novelty. Because it's
like you're trying to be a rock star making noise,
right.
I thought of like
to people who are into noise, that could be cool, but
I thought of like Emil Bolio. I mean, I know it's not his real name,
right?
It's like
it's a character, though. It's like
it's like really funny to think of like, oh no, dude. Okay, I was gonna make a joke. I was gonna say it would be really funny to think of like Dua Lipa coming out with a noise project, but it's like Poppy did that. Poppy?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She did that.
Ghostman.
Yeah, her and Ghostman. She just did that. And that's really interesting, don't you think? Because I never thought about. No, I have thought about the idea of like when you listen to pop or rap, you're listening to that person, and a lot of people don't realize, no, it's a facade. It's like a persona that they assume, It's bizarre to think about that with noise. It's really strange to think about that with noise. Like, oh, this is just what this guy does all the time. He doesn't eat or sleep. This is just what he does. Like,
Or imagine noise with Ghost Raiders.
I don't know what that is. I'm sorry.
Ghost Raiders, like with rap and stuff, but mean, arguably you could say like in the pop sphere, it's kind of similar thing as other people are writing your stuff.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know what I mean?
Yeah, and then it's funny to think about like ghostwriting noise.
Yeah, that's
you
what I'm
said-
saying.
you
Yeah,
said-
that's what
You
that's what I'm
said
saying.
ghost writing, and my brain went.
Oh,
Ghost
yeah.
writing? No, never mind. Never mind.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just gonna say like I think like in general the attitude with noise is more just like appreciating the art itself rather than kind of focusing on the person making it, you know. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
certainly
for
certain
sure.
people are like mythologized and whatnot, but
Right.
generally it's like the product, the art package, whatever, is like more important than
Right,
whoever's
right.
making it.
Which is like, it's not, solely a noise thing, but it is very much a noise thing. And yeah, I mean, that just adds this other element to it, as a listener, as this person who appreciates it, where that's like a thing that I think you don't consciously consider a lot of the time, but it kind of adds to it. I don't know. It's definitely, I think, a very integral factor to noise. And again, like when people do present themselves as like the central thing of it, it's like a novelty. I mean, talking about like Furnow or something, where it's like you know who he is, and he puts himself out there. There's a lot of pictures of him, and he's like kind of a celebrity in the whole sphere. But that's kind of like a novelty in this whole world, because that's kind of not the usual.
I feel like a lot of people kind of make fun of him for like all his photos of just like wearing sunglasses, like frowning, just like looking really cool.
Yeah. But it's I mean, it's like, it's kind of, because it's not every person, when that happens, it's a lot of fun. Same with Masana, same thing, wearing the sunglasses, having that particular look and presenting himself that way. But it's like, it's a novelty, and because it's such like it's not as common in that whole world, it's a little bit more fun when it happens. You know what I mean? Because it's like,
stands out more.
Yeah, because it's goofy for sure, but that's almost part of it, is that there's a comedy to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like maybe a right and wrong way to do it, or maybe that's not the right term to use, but like, you can sort of have that focus on the person itself making the noise and what they're, especially like with live performances, like what they're actually doing on stage, what they're doing with their bodies and whatnot. But maybe there's a fine line between that being like cool and that being just kind of like, oh, like this guy's just like pretentious, like up their own ass or whatever.
Right.
So, point.
were you guys talking about like noise personas?
Yeah, we're just kind of talking about like, the idea of like presenting yourself as like, this is me, I make noise, like a more focus on the person versus like a focus on the art object you're creating, and kind of like removing the person behind it,
I guess there is some discussion to be had about this, because maybe it wouldn't be specifically noise related, but it's like, the almost incidental mythologization of artists when you like read reviews, interviews, and see pictures of them and stuff. I thought of like Sam McKinley of the Rita. I'm sure before he started doing noise, he was just some guy, and then like you think of these really cool photos of him performing live, the one where he's like this, on the table, or like anyone,
like is his head in a tank of water with like scuba gear or whatever.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. I wonder if, I think way earlier in this discussion, I when I was talking about deleting my Instagram, I jokingly said my brand, but part of it is real.
For sure.
Because like I deliberately don't post stuff on Instagram that like, I like put my personal stuff as like the close friends thing, and I leave like the label and music stuff public, because I don't know, it's like It's really funny to think about. There are definitely some artists who don't give a shit, and like you listen to their music and it's like insane and tense and scary, and then you go on the Instagram and it's them getting ice cream with their girlfriend, and it's like, man, my
Yeah.
perception.
Oh, dude, I think
the
that made
mask.
me think of like, I think one of the funniest examples of that kind of thing is Phila Medusa, who you brought up earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, but like, I haven't even seen it. I've only heard about it, but apparently that guy had an Instagram that was just like thirst trap content. Like
Oh
he was
my
just
God.
like posting all these like sexual like videos and images of himself, just like softcore porn.
What
And
the
he's just this
fuck?
like big like ripped like muscly dude. And
I always think of fucking Corpse Grinder from Cannibal Corpse as the perfect example of that, where, I mean, you know, Cannibal Corpse, and on his Instagram it's like him with his family, and the thing that he likes to go do is go to like carnivals and stuff and win big stuffed animals so that he can donate them to like children's hospitals. And so that's what all of his posts are, is him and his two daughters, and he goes and like has a good time at the fair or the carnival, and then takes pictures of all the prizes that he won that he's gonna donate. And it's just this like he's like the dude with the thickest neck in the world and like long hair, and he's just like,
Yeah,
that's awesome. I love that. That's so wholesome.
that's so funny. The example I gave wasn't. I didn't just come up with it. It was Mac Shami. I don't know how you say his name, of Kufar, and like
oh yeah,
Crown of Cerberus and all them. You know, because like Kufar is intense and like very emotional and crazy and scary, and then like his Instagram is just hanging out with my girlfriend. We went to the movies. We got food together. I don't know. Good for him. He's living his life.
It's the duality of man on display.
Yeah.
You know?
I could never do that. I mean, I'm sort of doing it now, I guess. We all are. You listen to our
Yeah.
music and you think, wow, these guys must be fucked in the head. And then you listen to the podcast and it's like, you know.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for maintaining a sort of mysterious like aura. I guess aura is like the new word everyone says, you know, for people who just kind of like very, very rarely post online, or just like, you know, are very mysterious in their online presence or whatever. And like certainly that can kind of like add to the art you're making to some degree, and to the kind of like hype and mythology around what you're doing. But I think it's equally, if not even more, like cool and impressive in some ways to have that kind of like polar opposite, like just showing both sides, like in a very unpretentious way, just be kind of like, yeah, I make my art, I'm also a person who lives a regular person life, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
hide that, you know, like I respect that too.
I mean, I always have the thought, like regularly once a year or so, where I'm like even I say this, and it's not because I consider myself some sort of public figure that everyone is aware of, but part of me is always like, man, I really fucked it up. I should have started being more mysterious and anonymous with everything. That seems so cool. But at the same time, like, there's two things that play into it, where it's like, you know, talk about Bandcamp is a great example. Like, I have a couple Bandcamps, but my main one that I've had, you know, for years since high school, where I've posted, you know, the finished albums usually, or collections of things I've made throughout the years. It's, you know, so many different genres that I've tried my hand at, and I just keep them up there a lot of the time, because part of me thinks, like, as a person who listens and to artists and fucking spends countless hours like learning about them and just finding deep interest in reading interviews and this and that, I would feel interested to have an archive of these things, to see this progression of this person and to see what they're interested in and this and that. And I'd like to at least feel, in some sense, if there's anyone out there who gives any type of shit about what I do, that I give them kind of the same thing that I would like. But then also it's like, it's just hard for me to not try and be my genuine self. So that goes both ways, where it's like Instagram's a great example, where it's like, I mean, I don't post normally, like, very, I guess this sounds shitty, but like basic posts of just like, oh, here's my family and Here's me going to the beach. Like I'm not that kind of person, but I do, I'm friends with, my own family. My own fucking dad he follows my Instagram, and he'll see the random shit I post, and he's watched these podcasts. You know what I mean? Like, he's very aware of everything I do. Both my parents are.
Shout out, Dad.
That's cool.
Yeah, shout out to my dad. Shout out to my mom. They, I feel lucky that they've always been very supportive of the weirdo shit I've done my entire fucking life. But, and I think maybe part of that is what plays into this, but, like, I just kind of, like, I don't hold up a facade, really, but it's also because I don't feel like it's necessary. But I also feel like I don't lean into some things that I wish I could, but it's like hard for me to do, which is like having these like anonymous personas and doing this whole like mysterious, weird, like fucking thing. I wish I could get myself to really do that, but it's hard.
The aura. You can't you can't aura max enough. I can't do it.
Right.
I can't.
I mean, do you remember,
at all.
Johnny, were you ever into Burial?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so you remember that.
Yeah,
That-
then his photos started showing up, and he's just
Yeah.
some normal British guy who enjoys
Right.
playing Dark Souls
But
2.
like, but leading up to that, and hell, even following that, where it's just like it's like, I mean, yeah, now we know he's just a guy, but it's like this, like there's still this mystique, and like even before that, it was like the only photo we had was that Mark Fisher interview where it's a picture of his silhouette in a fucking puddle.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
this is
yeah.
so. It's like, who is this guy?
Can't
I
get
love
more
that
aura
shit.
than that.
Yeah, and so like noise is full of a lot of that, and it's kind of just by the nature of it. I think.
It's so funny to think like there's no photos of him online. His aura. It's so funny, man.
That's how it is.
I can't do it.
All right.
I can't do it at all. I'm so terrible at like cultivating aura. I don't give a fuck. All right, anyway, we're
Oh,
wrapping
yeah,
up.
me too.
It doesn't
Me
matter.
too.
I think we covered a lot of important stuff this time around. A lot of stuff related to the internet and how it's shaped noise and people's, I don't know, how people use it in different ways to express themselves. And yeah, I don't know what exactly we have planned for the next episode. I would like to start inviting other people to interview and whatnot pretty soon. I want to, get a few episodes in before we start doing that, but maybe we can start looking into that. But yeah, we'll figure something out.
Yeah. Well, till next time, everybody. Thank you very much for watching or listening, and take it easy.